Okay, so welcome everyone, and this is Yes UK, and we are on live on YouTube. So we are a group of young professionals who are passionate about energy and sustainability, and we decided to create these Yes Talks. So Yes Talks is the principle is a talk show where we invite experts to share their experience and about like one particular subject. So today we want to speak about behavior change, because we think this is like a really important issue, especially in the context of COVID-19. So yeah, we have with us today Kana, who is from Hubbub. Hi, Kana. And we have also Chris, who is the co-CEO of Global Action Plan.
Hi.
Hi, Chris. So behavior change. Why? Because as everyone noticed, we had a lot of change of habits and at home, and we stopped like public transport, and we noticed like a lot of differences in terms of air pollution, and we just started to think like, how can we keep these good habits for post COVID-19. So we're going to start by each speaker to present themselves. So Kana, if you want to start.
Yep. Let me attempt at sharing my screen. Maybe this is it. Can you see this?
Yes. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Lovely. So hello everyone, I'm Kana and I'm from Hubbub. I always start these talks with an introduction to Hubbub and why we do what we do. And in a nutshell, we want to make environmental action simple and fun and desirable. And we try to bring as much as optimism and playfulness as we can to our campaigns. And we work across different environmental issues, and we try to talk about things that are practical and that people come into contact with every day, like the clothes they wear, the food they eat, the homes they live in, and the neighborhoods. And whenever we work on campaigns or whenever we start a new project, we always try to first do a bit of research about the issue, gain insight, observe the problem in real life, and then we try to find different behavior change techniques to address the issues that we're seeing, and then share the results, good and bad, so that people can learn from our mistakes and not repeat the same experiment. They were thinking of doing something similar. And we always try to think of ways to make it scalable so that it can be copied in other places. So these are just a few behavior change techniques that we use in some of our campaigns, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But in a nutshell, our vision is a world where everyone is an environmentalist, whether they realize it or not. So some of you may have seen this voting ashtray before, and this is something that we came up with a few years ago, and it was for a project with Westminster City Council, and we were tasked to address littering issues in one of their busiest streets. It was cleaned 7 times a day, and it was messy. There were 3 pubs, 2 restaurants, and we spent a whole week just watching what was happening on the street, who was littering, why were they littering, and we found that it was mostly young men who were smoking outside the pubs and would litter their cigarette butts. So we thought, okay, what are they interested in? Well, they're interested in football, most of them anyway. And we thought that instead of creating, a massive poster saying, did you know that littering cost, X amount of money to the council, we thought, let's make it fun and easy for them to not litter. So we thought we'd ask the question of who's the best footballer in the world, Ronaldo or Messi? And as you can imagine, this caused some crazy reactions from people, because we actually stacked up the answers so that Ronaldo would win. So people were getting really angry and really emotional. And this went viral on Lad Bible and, YouTube and Twitter. And so, we were starting to get queries about, how can we get this voting ashtray? Lots of people wanting to buy it. So what we actually do now is sell this commercially, but we don't actually trademark it. So if you want to create something like this for your university or your workplace, you're very welcome to. And then we also have a campaign called Leads by Example, which is all about increasing recycling on the go in Leeds. And this, I think, is a really nice example of how we bring different sectors together and we collaborate on a problem. So recycling on the go is essentially how, things that you buy on high street, like, food from Pret or McDonald's, are harder to recycle because there aren't facilities to recycle on the high street. So we worked with Leeds City Council, different retailers, different supermarkets, cafes, and we create a really fun and engaging campaign on recycling. So we had different bins of different colors. We don't really use the usual green color of recycling bins. We try to make it eye-catching and have a uniform design all over the high street so people know exactly what they need to do. And this is a campaign that I am managing. It's called Community Fridges, and in essence, it's a fridge in a public space where anyone can exchange surplus food, even businesses. And they're open to everyone in the community. And there is no referral process if you want to use it. There's no limit as to how many times you want to use it. It's completely accessible by everyone. And we have a community fridge network, which I manage, and there are nearly 100 community fridges in the network. So they're spread across the country in places like community centers or schools, churches, anywhere that people can access easily. And the idea is to reduce food waste and bring people together. And I think this is the last example that I have. This is our plastic fishing campaign. And I think this is a really nice storytelling piece about plastic and the value of plastic. So what we do is we have created 99% recycled plastic boats that take kids onto a plastic fishing tour all across the River Thames. So they learn about plastic pollution, but also they know that the plastic that they gather from the river would be turned into more plastic boats that would take even more people to go on these plastic fishing trips. And that's it, really. Hubbub it's a stop whistle tour of Hubbub and what we do. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kana. Now, Chris, if you want to also present yourself and the Global Action Plan.
Yes, thank you very much. I will share a few slides with you. Thank you for the invitation to join you today and to talk about the value of behaviour change, how we can achieve behaviour change to the best of our ability as environmental practitioners, and really looking forward to the conversation. So just give you a few slides to introduce Global Action Plan for those people who are not aware of the organisation yet. So hopefully this will all work. Okay. I've started at entirely the wrong place. Let me start at the beginning first. That's a better place to start, isn't it? So I just want to give you a few slides. The remit of Global Action Plan is to help us towards a green and thriving planet where we can enjoy lives within the Earth's limit. And that mission involves inspiring change that gets people to understand that what's good for us is good for the planet, and largely environmentally friendly activities are better for the people who carry them out. We also figure out that there's a lot of different organizations need to be involved in tackling the environmental challenges that we face at the moment. We are very committed to tackling the root causes of environmental destruction through behavior change. And it's vital that we see the scale of change that's required. So we don't do things, like reducing the use of plastic straws, for example. It's really not going to cut it for the scale of change that is needed to solve the crises that we face. So we're very focused on the significant change that we need to tackle those crises, which is going to involve collaboration across the government and media, business, as well as members of the public. And I think when we talk about behaviour change, we often just think about what can the public do, but it really needs to be a team effort to change the way that society works. And this is really just to lay home the point that across the changes that we need to see across society that will reduce the environmental impact that we all have in developed nations, that the future we see is good for us and good for the planet. There are some obvious ones, like active travel instead of driving reduces carbon emissions and increases the exercise that people get. But there are also some less well-known well-being benefits of environmental action. For example, the relationship we have with stuff at the moment, how we consume stuff, how we consume clothing and gadgets, is actually really unhealthy for us when our mental health is concerned. And so we really bring home this message that what's good for us is good for the planet, what's good for the planet is good for us. We work on issues at both the grassroots and the mass scale, so you might find us running programs in schools, or you might find us on the BBC Breakfast Sofa talking about in this example, the damage of air pollution to unborn babies and the importance of tackling pollution on an enormous scale. And young change makers are really at the heart of everything that we do, both as a rationale for taking action on environmental issues, because it is the future of young people that is being jeopardized, and also because of their enormous power to be change makers. And we've really seen that come to the fore in recent years with the Schools for the Future work, with Greta Thunberg, and the campaigns across the world of young people making their voices heard. So finally, just wanted to share the two issues that we are focusing on for the next few years of our business plan. And one of those is compassion, not consumerism. We are looking to ignite a total transformation in how we view success as individuals. Is it about collecting as much stuff as we can, getting the biggest car, biggest house, biggest collection of handbags and shoes that we possibly can? Or is there actually something else that is going to be a more fulfilling way of life? And then clean air is a real crisis that hinders and damages the life of millions of people in the UK and across the developed world every single day. Recently in the lockdown, 2 million people with respiratory conditions in the UK have reported that they've literally found it easier to breathe because of the reduced air pollution. So that's the sort of scale of damage that is happening on a daily basis because of air pollution. And so we are very focused on tackling the clean air problem as well. I'll hand back to you, Manon, and you can take us to the next part of the conversation.
Yes.
Go on, Guy.
Yes. thank you guys for the presentation. It's always good to understand more in depth of the organizations that you guys work. And I think both of you, Kana and Chris, touched in the points that my first question to open the debate is Corona brings us new opportunities and challenge from the perspective of behaviors. So from the cycling perspective of air pollution, some numbers, it's 200% was the increase in cycle to work scheme with emergency service workers looking for bicycles to keep going to work in the commuting routine that they had to do during the lockdown. And on the other hand, we have different behaviors with delivery, for example, with Amazon increasing to 26% their sales during the lockdown, which represents more waste, plastic, and different habits that we performed recently with the lockdown as well, with the Corona. So I would like to see both perspectives from you. What are the challenges and opportunities you think that Corona has created to new behaviors in our lives? So those that are sustainable, as for example, cycling, and on the other hand, those that are not sustainable, and we might have to think in the future how to change them as well with these new normal conditions.
Shall I start?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think the COVID-19 crisis has been really interesting in terms of behavior change for reasons you've just said. I think that, yeah, it's definitely shown that change can happen faster and at a bigger scale. And I think that it has made everyone focused on the core things like, you know, food and family and health. I think that, you know, there are lots of positives to what the lockdown has made us feel and how it has changed our behavior, but there are also the other side, which is that lots of people are suffering, and it has been really, really hard for some people. It has unearthed, you know, the inequality gap even more. So I think that when we talk about the learnings, we also shouldn't overlook that, you know, the crisis has also, you know, not been a very good thing, really. But what I really like, and what I've noticed is that it has shown the importance of simplifying messages. So, you know, the call to action of stay at home was really clear and really simple. Everyone understands what it means. Everyone could get on board. Now, how do we do that with climate change? Can we have a call to action that's simple and clear and that sticks with people? You know, it taps into the collective responsibility very, you know, in a very straightforward way. And yeah, I'd be interested to see how we can, you know, talk about climate change in ways that we talk about COVID-19, you know, something that you can't see with your eyes, something that is hidden, but somehow everyone understands that it's their responsibility to take action. And there are definitely cases where people have been learning to, you know, waste less food and plan their meals better, cook better, use their leftovers better. But we also have been using plastic a lot more, and it has dropped down to people's top priority environmental issues, right? Like, people think now that plastic is better because it's more hygienic and it's disposable. And so how do we reignite these conversations later in the future? And yeah, what would that conversation look like, moving away from a pandemic world to a world that is concerned about climate crisis?
I think I agree wholeheartedly with everything Kana's just said, and I'll try and focus in on fewer issues than being too broad. I actually wrote a piece that I think had 12 new perspectives in total that we think have been sparked by the coronavirus. So I won't bore you with all 12. I'll try and narrow it down a bit. We took looking at the high level, I think certainly new perspectives have been sparked on, what is important. Is it what's important in our lives? Is it about, family and the people we miss being able to see and not being able to hug our relatives, versus, is it really important that I get that latest pair of trainers? Through to, what we buy and how we buy it, how we travel. And as Kana mentioned, that role between the social contract, really, between government and people. I think what has been brought back onto the table, which has perhaps been missing for a fair few years, is really a strong role of the government. And I have my letter here that I received from Boris Johnson, which told me what I was allowed to do and not allowed to do when the lockdown happened. And it's actually a very, very good piece of behaviour change communication. And I would like to think that we could have such clear communication about climate change from central government. So I think that there's a huge range. But if I sort of narrow it down just into thinking about travel, we've carried out some surveying recently, which looks at how people have changed and are intending to change. We know that the majority of the public here in the UK is keener than ever to see air pollution tackled. They are even more concerned about air pollution now than before coronavirus, because they have linked coronavirus to air pollution and vice versa. And the scientists back up what the public believes, which is that coronavirus is more likely to hit somebody more severely if there is air pollution in those communities, because it causes damage to our respiratory systems, which then coronavirus can sort of cause a further damage on top of. And how people are expecting to change. We've certainly seen an increase in cycling and walking rates. People are very supportive. The majority of people across the UK are supportive of more space for walking and cycling. They are supportive of more home working. They're supportive of businesses taking faster action than before to tackle air pollution. So that's majority position on all of those subjects. And just delving into that subject of where we work. So many of us are getting used to this situation of working from home now. We've carried out quite an in-depth study of how people have changed their working patterns. We've seen somewhere around 8 million new home workers, new workers starting to work from home during the lockdown. So we've gone from around 10 million to around 18 million workers working from home. And half of those new home workers previously were not allowed to work from home by their company at all, or were discouraged from working from home. And 87% of people who are now working from home want to continue to some degree after the lockdown ends. Not every day. The majority of people do want to see their colleagues physically, face to face, at least once a week. But the majority want to keep that home working in place in their working habits. And the benefit that could have is enormous. So when we talk about tackling the root cause of environmental problems, the way we travel is one that we really haven't got on top of in the UK. Our transport emissions are the only sector where emissions have been rising in recent years. And if we looked at the scenarios of what we could see in reduced car travel for a work purpose if people were to work from home more regularly, and without anybody additionally working from home on a permanent basis. So everyone who previously had a physical workplace still goes there at least once a week. With that still in place, we could cut vehicle mileage by 11 billion miles a year in the UK, which is about 1 in 5 car journeys completed for a work purpose. Environmentally, that's about the same as closing 2 airports in the UK. So there's an enormous change that we could see, but it's not going to happen automatically. And it's not just about the people. who are in that situation. It really is the businesses and the employees that need to find a way of working from home in a way that works for everyone. They've got the right equipment, the setup. They are allowed to do that. Teams are trained on how to work from home. Plus, then you use the time when you are together in an office to, or your workplace, to do the things that you have to do when you're together. So it's going to require a real team effort. And I think that's a prime example of what I would say the behaviour change challenge is. It's not just about convincing one person to go and do something differently.
Yeah, thanks both. I think, yeah, we touched something is that how to make people responsible for their action and how to make this easy for everyone and clear. I think that what is really difficult is usually people don't like be told what to do. So we have to find a way to yeah, as you both do already, like find a fun way or maybe engaging way, like that in their lives they don't feel the burden to have to comply to like environmental rules that would make them just like dislike the process. So how, I think the question is like, for example, now we can see with the ease of the lockdown that people rush to the consumerism style again. So they rush to Primark, to like, they go to shopping centers, right? And it seems like we re-enter this loop of overconsumption. And yeah, so I know that you both work in companies that implement strategies to change that. So I'd like you to talk more about, yeah, what are the strategies in the campaigns that you use to influence people, and how can we create this change more?
Yeah, I think that there are two things here. I think one is that the crisis has been anxiety inducing for a lot of people. There is a lot of uncertainty. People want comfort, they want uplifting stories and hope. And I think hope's really important in bringing people together and in inspiring people to do something differently. And the second thing is that you have to allow people to make mistakes. You have to allow people to revert back to their old habits, and you have to give space for them to do that. But that doesn't mean you can't keep celebrating the positive changes that have happened, and can't keep telling, inspiring stories and stories of change that have come out of this lockdown. So yeah, I think it's about balancing giving people the option and also keep encouraging them in positive and optimistic ways to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the reaction that people have had in the crisis that we've just faced was fantastic. On the whole, I've been in the centre of London throughout the entire thing, and the vast majority of people have been not just abiding by the rules, but helping each other out. And we saw 750,000 people volunteer in the space of 48 hours to be NHS support, to be an NHS support army and go and deliver medicines and food to people who had to shelter at home. And I think it just demonstrates that people are extremely keen to be helpful. And too often, I think we believe that most people are selfish and not going to play by the rules and not going to be a useful part of society. And we think people are the problem. The vast majority of people are not. The vast majority of people are good-hearted and want to be part of the solution. So I think if we are to spark the same sort of response that we've seen from coronavirus, with the likes of NHS volunteering, support for the NHS, people are just helping out their neighbours, looking out for each other. I really don't think we have been quite honest enough with people about the scale of the problem with climate change. And so I think that there is both sides. We have to show there's a very positive alternative to what we have. And I'm very happy to come on and talk about sort of fashion and the alternative to the way that we currently sell fashion and the impact it has on young people's mental health. So that there is, you know, we've got to sell a better alternative future, but also that we haven't laid down the challenge quite as bluntly as it needs to be put down on an individual basis. If we were to square with people, or be honest with people that in the UK we consume about 27 tons worth of stuff every year. And it's 90 billion tons across the world. 50% of our carbon emissions come from that resource extraction and process. 90% of our biodiversity loss, 90% of the extinctions we are causing come from that resource extraction. We simply can never use technology, recycle enough to make that 27 tons worth of consumption per person each year sustainable. It just won't work. We need to radically reduce the amount of stuff that we consume. And it's not really that much use me telling people that. That's what you would expect me as an environmentalist, an environmental charity, to say. I would really love the government to level with people that we cannot keep consuming so much stuff and ever have a sustainable society, a sustainable economy, a planet that isn't going to hurtle towards environmental destruction. So we've got to lay out that challenge, and then alongside it there are all the great nudge techniques that we can use to get people towards the right practices. But I think there's some things we just need people to buy in more to doing some of these taking on some of these environmental practices, which require a bit of a shift in their in their practices. It's not as simple, okay, I'll stop buying that and I'll buy this instead. It's a more fundamental review of how we live.
Yeah, and I think that the way we talked about climate change before COVID was the cost of taking action. So how much would building offshore winds cost, or how much would doing this cost? But what COVID has shown us is that when you show people the cost of inaction, lives, jobs, that stick a lot more. And if we were to do the same with climate change, to show the cost of inaction that relates to how people will live in the future, so food supply chains might be disrupted, air pollution, as Chris has mentioned, and just the way we live in general, how that would be disrupted by climate change. I think that we don't talk enough about the risk of inaction of climate change.
I think this we do, because there is I agree, like we need to talk obviously more about it, but there is this line where you don't want to be too catastrophizing and too negative, because people start to stop listening. So it's difficult to find this line of, because I have the impression that it's been 10 years already, like scientists put the message out there, and like obviously with Greta Thunberg we saw like a rise among young people to try to talk about it more, but it seems like it just doesn't reach the important people, like the people who actually can influence our laws and like how we actually consume. And so I guess like, as you said, Kana, it's like, keep hope, keep message of hope and positive change. But then like how to make it so that it reach also like the people who have a real influence, like the governments. Because like from what I understand, like obviously we are trying to make change at our level, but it's just a little straw in the ocean. I think that's what a lot of people think, and that's why a lot of people. A lot of my friends, they just don't end up even not doing that much because they think that their action doesn't count.
Yeah, there was a piece of research, I think it's about 20 years old now, that the UK government did called I Will If You Will, which just looked at the importance of government leadership before the population will kind of play their part. And I would like to see the UK government do a heck of a lot more to lead the way in their own practices and in the messages that they put out. So we are, for example, working with the Department for Environment's fleet, and they've committed to electrifying their fleet. And we need to see many more actions like that, where they're willing to sort of be the leaders in action. And so, just focus on air quality for a second. If we're honest with people about the things that make a real difference, as well as being positive about what they are like, then it helps people know when you've done enough. And if we could say to people, you know what, if you cycle and walk every journey you could do that's under 2 miles, and if you then don't drive more than, say, 2,000 miles a year, that's okay. That would be sustainable. What I think people are really struggling with is, when have I done my bit? What's enough for me? When they do the things that are, when the population is doing things which is better for the environment, they are finding loads of benefits. We've been doing a campaign called Breathe Back Cleaner Air, and getting people across the UK to send in the things that they've enjoyed about having low traffic neighbourhoods during the lockdown. And it's fantastic. People are talking about everything from being able to take the kids outside without fear of them getting into a road accident, through to being able to hear the bird song, exploring new areas that they'd never seen before because they're normally just whizzing past in a car, bumping into their neighbours, having a better connection with people in their neighbourhood. There are so many benefits. Losing weight because people are getting more exercise. There's so many benefits to doing pro-environmental behaviours that we really have got a lot to sell to members of the public. And so I would love to see us as a nation really leading from central government and from business leaders, leading to say, there's a better way we could do this. Even if we didn't have air quality problems that were killing 40,000 people a year in the UK, we should do these things because our lives would be better anyway. If our streets were less full of cars and more full of kids enjoying themselves and neighbours having a chat, that would be a better world. So let's do it anyway.
So focus on well-being, maybe more than the catastrophic impact of climate change that we all going to die at the end of the century. So I guess maybe that would be more the strategy than you think.
Yes.
As an advertising, how to influence people.
Yes, absolutely. I think when it comes to business, it's kind of similar to people. If we want businesses to be changing the ways that they run and operate, we've really just got business is just a collection of people making decisions together and working together to meet the business aims. So the same things that work for people, members of the public, can work with businesses. And that they are simply, as Professor Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize and literally wrote the book on nudge, says, there's really 3 things you can do to encourage people to change. It's make the thing you want them to do easier, more attractive, or socially expected. And so the same can work with businesses, and we've just launched Business for Clean Air, which is the first campaign to encourage businesses to play their part fully across everything they can do, from travel through to construction sites and how they heat their buildings, to address air pollution. And that uses all three of those mechanisms. We are saying, look at the Business for Clean Air website, look at the guidebook. That tells you how to do it. That's making it easier for you. We've laid out, to make it more attractive, we've laid out all the benefits of how this can help you save money, how this can help you have a better relationship with your customers. And then on being socially expected, we already have 15 businesses who are saying, we're doing this. We have board level sponsors who are determined to make their business a business for clean air. So if there's one thing I'd like to get across in this, just remembering those three things: make it easier, make it more attractive, make it socially expected. If you follow that, it really helps guide a good behavior change engagement program, whether it's people or business and organizations that you're hoping to influence.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think, yeah, it is really important for government and businesses to also get involved in this. And arguably they have more power than individuals to create changes at a bigger scale. But I also think that it's in the not too distant future, I think the way we talk about power and how power is created and used will change, I think, quite a lot, because you see all these movements like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement and the XR, Extinction Rebellion movement. These are leaderless initiatives. They have no institutions, no leaders, but their ideas have spread widely across the world. And I think that the use of mass participation will increase in the future, and businesses are actually thinking that it's very important for them to have purpose and to have different values than just make as much profit as possible. And that's all been influenced by how people are talking about these ideas that they share about what a good society should look like. So I think that, we often underestimate how the power of, a group of people doing things. And there's a really nice quote about how a group of small people doing things and wanting to change things is the only thing that's ever worked, right? So I think there's two sides of this, which is the government and the system level change, but also the people will need to change too. But the government can make it easier for people to change.
It's difficult to track, isn't it? I think that's one of the difficulties with this whole behavior change, engagement, social marketing, what do you want to call it, the world that we're in, is to prove that the thing that you did led to the change, and not just to justify your own existence, but to show that you're making progress. And if people in the movement keep doing more of these things, we will get to where we need to get to. So it can be really difficult. One thing, and perhaps the last sort of air quality thing that I'll share with you, is with Clean Air Day, we set up the National Clean Air Day scheme in 2017, which is one day where people try those things that can reduce air pollution. And to add to the make things easier, more attractive and socially expected moniker, I would also add a trigger and a moment when people try the new thing that you want them to do. So that's all about making it more likely that people will do it, but having a trigger that actually gets them to decide whether they're going to do it or not is really, really valuable too. So that's what Clean Air Day is. Are you going to decide to work from home that day instead of driving into work? Or are you going to walk the kids to school instead of driving them to school? And what we've been tracking in this idea of, is the movement getting anywhere? Since 2017, we've been tracking how many people in the UK believe that tackling air pollution should be a priority for the country. And that is the number of people who say that has gone up from in the 60% to in the 80% range. So that's 5 million more people in the UK over the last 3 years have now started to say, yes, we should be tackling air pollution as a priority in this country. And of course, that's not all down to Clean Air Day. That's a whole movement of people who've been messaging that from health NGOs, travel NGOs, environmental NGOs, local authorities, businesses, individual campaigners, children themselves. There's an enormous amount of people that are behind that, but it's helpful to have some of these long-term insights that you can track to see whether we're getting anywhere as a movement. And I'm really pleased that we are getting somewhere in that clean air world. So whilst we might not know exactly what it is that all of us are doing in the movement that's really getting that change, maybe it's a bit of everything we're doing, or maybe it's one organisation's really triggered it all and we should all be doing what they're doing. Who knows? It's difficult to know, but what we all should take from it is some confidence that what we are all collectively doing together is working, and we should keep plugging away.
Chris, I think both of you touched on this point, and I think that this is important because I really believe it's the role of the government to support tracking these results. I think they have more resource and also a holistic view of all the sectors and the interactions that we have with actions. And both of you touched the point of collaboration as I think one of the main pillars to promote the change. It's not only one organization, it's not only one company, but it's a sector, it's a business, and also how different actors can stimulate this. And I also believe that this collaboration brings to what Kana highlighted about the community-led movements, where you don't have this top-down control or management perspective. It's an organic movement that are promoting change and also through collaboration. And Corona impacted us on this and how the communities grouped together to promote change and help each other to guarantee that everybody was safe. I want to see to understand your views on what is the role of each sector. So what do you see as the government main activity that would support these solutions to be implemented? What is the role of the business sector? Because they are formed by people, as you mentioned, but they are also has people as clients. And when they want to promote change, if they do through that product or service, it's a really good way to promote this change. Rather than selling a light, you're going to sell the service of lighting and the bulb. This reduce resource, these reduce raw materials, these help us to achieve these new behaviors. So if you could just share with us the perspective you both think about each sector of the society can make this contribution to new change, and how you see your organizations contributing to nudge each of these sectors with campaigns and actions you have planned so far.
Do you want to go first, Chris, or shall I?
I don't know if
it's a really tough question, isn't it?
I'm happy to, but you might just have to shut me up if I go off on one about some particular businesses where I'd like to see.
Maybe go on, Kana.
Shall I go first, and then we'll give Chris the floor later? Okay. Yeah. Well, as I said, Hubbub's work is focused on changing individuals' behaviour, and we think that we need to make it as easy as possible for people to make change. And obviously, government has a role to play in that. But if you think about the last sort of 10 years and what environmental milestones or environmental changes that have happened, there are so many changes that have been created or started by people like Greta Thunberg, the Blue Planet effect by David Attenborough, the fact that Greggs now sell vegan sausages, how that changed and broke the internet. And so there are so many other things that as individuals and businesses that we can do. And I think that, as I said, moving forward, there will be more emphasis on businesses having a purpose, because it feels like there is now a shift in thinking about what a business should do in terms of sustainability. There's higher expectations now. We heard, recently, Boohoo, one of the leading fashion brands, they had a workshop that paid less than living wage, much less than living wage, and their stock dropped massively. But I think that in the past sustainability was never in the economic model, so we never really took that into account until very recently. But it's really interesting to see what happened with Boohoo, with their stock going down, showing that people do care about these things and they do take into account the views of their customers and what they care about. We've got lots of campaigns encouraging and raising awareness of what people can do at home and in their lives to create less impact on the environment. But we also try to make this scalable and facilitate people so that they can be more resilient in their own communities. So with community fridges, for example, the initial idea was to talk about food waste locally. But we know that even though we only want to talk about food waste because we're an environmental charity, the reality is never that simple. People who come to the fridges are people who are in need. There's no denying that. But when we talk about community fridges, we always talk about it in terms of what it could be. If you can bring people together around food, can you then teach these people how to budget, how to cook their own meals, how to make their food go further and use up their leftovers? And then if you can do that, can you encourage them to share other belongings? So if you have a pasta maker that you only use once a year, could you actually just share that with your community and have a library of things where instead of one person owning a pasta maker or a pizza oven, you share this in the community? And how can you get people to have more localized food supply? Like, can you encourage people to have their own community gardens, food co-ops, so they have power in buying basic food and basic needs? There are lots of ways that we can create more resilient communities by changing people's behavior and upskilling them.
Yes, Kana. Chris, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief and not go off on a rant. So I think business action on environmental issues happens for one of two reasons. It's either voluntary or it's regulated. They either see progressive leaders see the need to tackle environmental issues because it's good for their business or because it's just morally the right thing to do, and more perhaps it's essential for their business because if we don't combat climate change, the supply lines of the fabrics or the food that they rely on are under extreme stress, and it's a critical risk to their business. And we've seen some progressive leadership. Hundreds of businesses in the US that signed up to the Paris climate goals when Trump pulled the US out of the Paris Agreement. And so there's a lot of examples of business leadership. There's a number of laggard areas. The car companies are one that I'm particularly frustrated with at the moment. We've just had the figures through again this year that shows carbon emissions from Europe's car fleet has increased again for the third year in a row. 40% of all car sales in the last year have been SUVs, which is just ridiculous when we're facing this climate disaster. And the car companies spend $35 billion a year advertising cars to members of the public, and have a responsibility as to what they are trying to sell to members of the public, and the amount of SUVs that are diesel and petrol fueled that they are putting onto the road. When we've had perfectly fantastic electric vehicles, the Nissan Leaf came out in 2010. They've been around for a decade, and we're still in the UK seeing less than 1% of our sales of cars in the UK are fully electric vehicles. So they are clearly not going to change until they're regulated to change. They've had every opportunity. They understand climate change. They understand air quality issues. There's no option, but they need to be regulated. And I hope that when the UK leaves the current EU rules, which it will do at the end of this calendar year on car sales across Europe, I hope that there are much firmer rules around the vehicles that we can sell in the UK. And I think that the final thing perhaps I wanted to come on to is where really I'd like to see more business leadership is with the role of clothing in our lives, and the way that clothing as a sector is being hugely exploited by a handful of extremely wealthy people to the detriment of millions of others. And I think this is another area where we are seeing a real growing interest in young people standing up and saying, you know, this is not good enough. So that the facts are that the way that clothes are marketed, and clothes and beauty products and other kind of gadgets and things that are really targeted at young people, the way that they are marketed at the moment is causing enormous damage to young people's mental health and well-being. 42% of 11 to 16-year-old girls in the UK say that they feel ashamed about the way they look sometimes or most of the time. The number of 17 to 21-year-old girls and young women who are not happy most of the time has gone up in the UK from 11% to 27% in the last 10 years. 30% of them are also considering plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery right now in the UK. That's horrendous that we've got to this situation where people don't feel comfortable enough in their own skin and feel like they have to buy clothes and beauty products to feel accepted and to feel normal. We've been working with particularly teenage girls, but boys as well, in schools to understand how they are experiencing the pressures to consume, which come through social media, come through the TV, come through billboards. And one 15-year-old called Zaria described the effect that seeing endless airbrushed ads have on her is that it pushes her deeper into a pit of despair every time she sees one of these. That's not the sort of language a 15-year-old should be using about a business's advert. And so what we are seeing is, in the pursuit of billionaires becoming richer, children are the collateral damage of this exploitative clothing sector. It's not every clothing brand. It's a number of them. And so, you know, another coming back to what are we talking about, the environmental well-being. Here we are running campaigns with parents and young people saying, you know, it's not just about saving the planet. This is about having a society in which we want to live, which young people have aspirations that goes beyond just owning the right item of clothing or the right eyeliner that's going to make them feel good for a few minutes before they see the next advert that's going to make them feel worse again. And what I'd really like the businesses to do is to put purpose at the start of all of this. The purposeful fashion is not about, you know, how many items of clothing can I buy, how regularly. I happen to live behind Central St Martin's College of Fashion and Art, and when I walk past that every day, I don't see like people just lining up Boohoo or Primark cheap T-shirts and pairs of jeans. I see them, you know, expressing themselves. I see them doing functional things, thinking about how clothing can help you do things in life. And I don't see them making young people feel inadequate as a way of getting them to like their clothes. So I really, really hope that we can bring fashion back to what it's supposed to be, a joyful expression of creativity, and away from this pursuit of just selling as much stuff as possible at the highest profit margin possible, not caring about the primarily women in the supply chain who are making these clothes, either in the UK or abroad, and really have marketing that celebrates the achievements of women buying fashion, not how they look when they buy fashion. And the final thing I think is really important to understand the scale of this problem. One individual who owns one of the fashion houses, one of the global fashion houses, if that individual gave away his entire worth, except for $1.5 billion, so he kept $1.5 billion to, you know, be able to live on and have a nice quality of life, but gave away the rest, that individual could double the entire annual spending on education, health, agriculture, transport, everything in the 35 poorest countries on the planet for an entire year. And what a hero that person would be if they could do that. They could, you know, transform the health services, the food supply chains, the education that millions of billions of children are getting in the 35 poorest countries in the world. And I would like us to be thinking that's a goal for society, not how many more billions could I have in my bank account while I'm making young people feel worse about themselves. I said I'd have one rant. That's it.
Yeah, getting a bit over time, but I think, yeah, that was really interesting. So thank you. Yeah, go on, Ravi.
We just have a question on YouTube to both the speakers, if I can just quickly ask that. They've said, thanks for the talk, it's been really interesting. The question is, the COVID pandemic has demonstrated overall that there's a generalized approach to changing behaviors. So being a global issue like climate change, do you think behavioral change action should be generalized, or would you promote a more tailored approach to different cultures? Which do you think is more effective?
I think it should be tailored. I mean, just even in the UK, every community is different. There are obviously going to be things that everyone can agree on and things that could be applied globally. But I think that we need to take into account the different challenges and different needs of different countries or communities, and respect their traditions as well. So yeah, I think a balance between the two, but definitely it's important to tailor it.
Yeah, totally agree. The one thing I would add is the importance of laying out the shared challenge. So there's challenges that we share around the amount of stuff that we consume, which is shared by about a third of the world's population. So we can all kind of understand that as a shared challenge that, you know, high-income countries use 27 tons of stuff per year per person, whereas a low-income country, the average is 2 tons of stuff per person per year. So we can understand those shared challenges, but I'm absolutely Karen, we need to tailor our behaviour change ask and our message and listen to what people are struggling with, if they're trying to, how they do their commute. You know, everyone's lives are different, and really need to listen to where they're coming from to help them solve the problems that they have.
Any other question, Harry?
No, that was, wait, no, sorry, wait, I think we had one more question. Sorry, it just came through. The question was, consumerism is closely related to GDP growth. How do you think governments can support this?
Yeah, now that is an enormous question. At the end of a webinar, we probably haven't got time to go into.
Yeah.
What I would certainly recommend anyone who's interested in this topic is to go and look at Professor Tim Jackson's work on prosperity without growth. That's the title of his book. It's fantastic. He runs the Centre for the Understanding of Sustainable Prosperity at the University of Surrey. I think there's enormous amount of sense in his approach to being able to have a prosperous society that's good for everybody, increases all of our quality of life, but doesn't rely on an endless use of environmental resources to continually grow GDP in order to have any sort of prosperity, because that clearly doesn't work. GDP is only stacked up on an unvalued environmental resource at the bottom of it all, which is doesn't get factored into any of the economic equations anywhere. We just assume it's free, and clearly it's not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's also important is considering whether GDP is the only way that we measure a country's success, right? Like, what if we measured happiness instead of GDP? Would that look very differently? Would the richest country actually be less happy than those who are, less developed? So there's a question around what we think is important, whether that's GDP or happiness or people's well-being, as Chris has said numerous times. Yeah, and I agree with the idea that we should move towards a more circular economy, valuing waste and ensuring that things that are, the whole supply chain is more efficient, uses less resources or resources that are renewable, and the waste can then be utilized as well for something, for a new product or for a new purpose.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. We're going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kana. Thank you, Chris. I think we had a really good chat. So yeah, good conversations. Well, I think see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, guys.
Bye,
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.